Is Buckingham Palace finally ready for a reckoning over the births of Meghan Markle's two children, Archie and Lily?
So she had to accept, that the things would be happening on a national level. And that's what the royal family has to accept as well. And most of them understand that. And so you make announcements. You tell people, the child's going to be born. You tell it where it's going to be born. You tell it when it was born. You show the child at a certain point. You tell us who the godparents are going to be. And we all enjoy this. And we're very much then, we, the general public, very much on the side of the person doing that and sort of enjoying it because they are a family at the centre of the nation, and that's all part of it. So to deny us that, I think, was sort of, kicking in causing trouble and showing she was going to do it her way, and that's when things began to go wrong.
Hugo Vickers, 40 years writing about the royal family, the captain of the lay stewards at St. George's Chapel, and on the 13th of May, on camera, he said this.
She's the only woman, as far as I know, if you look at the timeline, who gave birth and then subsequently went into labour later in the day.
That is Hugo Vickers, on the record, saying the Archie birth timeline doesn't work. The man who has carried the Queen's coffin inside St. George's Chapel. The man the Financial Times has called the most knowledgeable royal biographer on the planet. The man whose new book on Queen Elizabeth II went into the Sunday Times top 10 the week it landed at Hodder and was serialized in the Daily Mail. That man, and Lady Colin Campbell, who has been raising the same question since 2020, finally has her establishment historian. 6 years of the loose cannon says this. Ignore her.
Meghan at the Albert Hall. How many weeks pregnant was she supposed to be? Was it about 8 weeks? And she looks as if she's at least 5 months pregnant.
And now a man who reads at Royal Services has said the same thing on Dan Wooten's channel and meant every word. Today's video goes through what Vickers actually said, what he wouldn't say, what's in the new book that's quietly making its way onto bookshelves across the Commonwealth, and the small documentary detail at the Buckingham Palace forecourt that none of this would matter without.
Do you remember Meghan actually refused to use the hospital that was usually used by royals and refused to use all of the normal medical staff, and there was all of the weirdness over the timing of the birth of Archie.
8 days ago, we walked through Tom Bower's 6 versions of Archie's birth. Today is the establishment voice. Different historian, same conclusion. Vickers didn't go on Dan Wooten's channel to talk about Archie. He went to promote Queen Elizabeth II, A Personal History, his new biography, published by Hodder on the 9th of April this year. 672 pages. 40 years of personal knowledge of the late Queen. A book The Telegraph gave 5 stars and the Financial Times reviewed with the line that has now followed him onto every chat show in Britain. But somewhere in the interview, the conversation turned to Meghan, as it does on Wooten's program, and Vickers's measured language stepped briefly out of the book and into the moment.
And why it was interesting to me is because Hugo Vickers is a cautious guy. He's a guy who has very close connections to the royal family, and a lot of what he says you have to read between the lines.
He said the Archie birth was crazy business. He said she was the only woman he knew of, on the timeline she gave, who appeared to have given birth and then gone into labor later the same day. And he said the obstetrician was never named, the godparents were never named, and that the secrecy itself was the part he could not square.
I couldn't care less who the godparents were, but I do think one ought to, why don't you just tell us, So you could see she was kind of had her own agenda, but what I didn't think she would do is to, I never thought she'd stay, to be honest, but I never thought she'd do it in the reign of the Queen, but she was prepared to do that.
Now, the timeline detail is not a new claim. Vickers said the same thing to The Sun in October 2024, in a longer interview about why he had lost confidence in the Sussexes. The quote ran in The Sun online and was syndicated, and at the time, nobody picked it up. Dan Wooten picked it up this month. And here's the thing about that. Wooten was at The Sun in 2019.
Again, I was at The Sun at the time, and I posed a whole load of questions to her team, her communications team, and it never made any sense. They lied, they lied about time, they lied about the location. It was so weird.
He covered the announcement of the birth as it happened, and on his own program last week, he said this on camera. The historian wouldn't say the word fraud. He didn't have to. Step away from the historian for a moment and walk to the gilded railings outside Buckingham Palace. The easel at the forecourt is not decoration. It is the documentary instrument by which a royal birth becomes a public record.
She gave birth to them, and she has quite deliberately caused doubt, and she has created mischief, knowing that it would damage the royal family, which would show a level of spite and malice that is truly not only sick, but evil.
A frame notice, hand-signed by the attending physician, placed at the railings on the morning of the birth, photographed by the Royal Rota Pool, and entered into the institution's archive. That is the convention. It exists for a reason that begins in 1688 with the warming pan scandal and the Privy Council depositions that followed, and was formalized in 1948 when the Home Secretary's attendance was finally dispensed with and the surgeon gynecologist's signature took its place.
All other royal babies in the line of succession have had their births signed off. Princess Eugenie, Princess Beatrice, Sarah York, Diana Wales, Catherine Wales, you name it. Everybody knows where the babies came from, at what time, with proof. The only two children that there is no proof for is Prince Archie Bunker and Princess Lily. You better hope that she's really entitled to what they claim she's entitled to.
For Prince George of Cambridge in July 2013, 3 names appeared at the bottom of the easel: Sir Marcus Setchell, Alan Farthing, Guy Thorpe Beeston. Real men with real medical licenses who could be checked, asked, quoted. For Princess Charlotte in May 2015, 2 of those same names returned. For Prince Louis in April 2018, the same 2 again. Surgeon gynecologists to the royal household, photographed shaking hands with Prince William on the Lindo Wing steps, quoted in the press, filed into the record. And in every case, the surgeon gynecologist's name was confirmed by the palace in advance. The Lindo Wing photographers had their pens out before the labor began. The institution wanted them named. That was the entire point of the convention.
And I have spoken to doctors, nurses, many women who've given birth to children, and all of them say the same thing. Those photographs of Meghan and the way the baby bump performed are totally unexpected, and they're not aware of any baby, any pregnant woman who is genuinely pregnant having her bump perform the way Meghan's has performed.
Then on the 6th of May 2019, the easel went up for Archie. Time of birth, 5:26 British summertime. Weight, 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Hospital, the Portland in Westminster. Doctor, blank. The Portland Hospital itself, when asked, issued a brief statement of congratulation and cited patient confidentiality, which is hospital language for, we are not telling you anything, which is fine. Hospitals do not have to. But every single sentence the British public has ever heard about what happened inside that building that morning rests on one of 2 voices, Harry's or Meghan's. No named third witness on the record. Not the doctor, not the midwife, not a single member of hospital staff.
And another thing that I know that they do, if a royal lady who's about to give birth, there's 2 phone calls that the security team makes. One to the palace to inform Her Majesty that, she's gone into labor. And 2, that to the security, the head of security to secure the premises where they go. Harry claims that they didn't do any of that. That means that the Royal Police Protection Officers violated security protocol, which will be a first.
4 easels, 3 doctors, 1 blank space. That is the documentary picture that no royal commentator under 60 has ever satisfactorily explained. Lady Colin Campbell has been raising the Archie question on her own YouTube channel since 2020. 6 years, hundreds of hours of long-form streams. She has done it from a chair in her Castle Goring office, in front of bookshelves carrying the 7 biographies she has published since 1992, including her 2020 book, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, which Pegasus put out in expanded form in 2022. She has been the most cited single voice raising timeline questions about Archie, and she has paid for it in column inches.
It's a matter of responsibility, and I suspect it's such a hot potato that I suspect the resolution will be down the line when Harry and those children will be removed entirely from various situations and positions. That, I think, is going to be the neatest, cleanest way of resolving something rather than any confirmation or exposure.
And before anyone says, wait, Isn't Lady Colin Campbell the one with the complicated history on this subject? Hold on, because the question is not whether Lady C said this, it is whether Hugo Vickers said it, and he did, on camera, to a journalist while promoting a Sunday Times top 10 book. The historian who reads at services in St. George's Chapel just confirmed the question the controversial aristocrat has been asking for 6 years. That is no longer Lady C's case, that is the establishment's case now. The day after Vickers' interview went up on Wooten's channel, Lady C herself appeared on the same program. Wooten played her the Vickers timeline quote, and she did something she does not often do. She slowed down.
And Hugo is impeccably well connected. And Hugo, unlike me, because you see, Hugo can be chucked out because Hugo's position, so to speak, is entirely related to his royal connections and his social connections in this country, while of course mine aren't. I mean, if I were excluded as a part of the British establishment, I simply have the American and the Jamaican and the international to fall back on. Hugo has none of that. So Hugo is extremely cautious. Hugo, which I am not. I don't need to be.
There's the convergence in one Lady C breath. She knows exactly what Vickers is and what she is. He has institutional positions to lose. She lost hers in 1975, and on this one question, after 6 years, they have ended up in the same place. She went on to use a much bigger word than Vickers did. She called what she has been describing for 6 years a scandal of an order she compared to the great frauds of royal history.
It's absolutely unbelievable that any member of the royal family could have set about creating what is an international scandal where people have the means as a result of her and her husband's conduct to question whether they have perpetrated the scam of the century upon not only the royal family and the British people, but the other realms of which any heir to the throne is heir to that throne as well.
Lady C named it, Vickers wouldn't. Both said the timeline is wrong. The book itself is the wider story. Queen Elizabeth II, a personal history, runs to 672 pages. It is published by Hodder. It was serialized in the Daily Mail in early April. It is the work of a man who first met the late Queen in 1968 and went on to attend her in his lay steward role on more than 40 private occasions inside St. George's Chapel. The Sussex chapter in that book is the centerpiece of the Telegraph Review and the Hello magazine front page treatment. The Hello piece, dated the 7th of April, ran with the line that the book reveals the turmoil Prince Harry and Meghan Markle caused the Queen in her final years. That is Hello magazine, not a tabloid, the coziest mainstream royal-friendly outlet in Britain. Vickers writes, on his own authority, in a passage now widely quoted, that the distress the Sussexes caused the late Queen in her final years cannot be overestimated. He goes further. In one passage, returning to the question of what Harry's actual role had become by 2022, he gives the late Queen this attributed line. Vickers said this part on camera as well.
And now Harry has opted out. And for what? To be a carer for Archie. So it sounds like she had almost a bit of a premonition that this life in California wasn't going to work out for her grandson.
The late Queen described her grandson in a private conversation Vickers records carefully as having become a carer for Archie. It is one sentence. Vickers attributes it. Hodder's lawyers cleared it, and it travels. Take a breath here. That sentence is not slang. It is not snark. The late Queen sits in the clean register of every serious conversation about her late reign, and it is right that she stays there. Vickers' care in how he frames the line is the model. The line stands because he stood it carefully, but it does stand. The man who carried the Queen's coffin into St. George's Chapel last September has now placed in a Hodder hardback the late Queen's own private summary of what her grandson's life had reduced to, and that line is in the same book as the Archie chapter he's been talking about on Wooten's channel.
And also, why is the belly several shades browner than anywhere else? It's not supposed to be browner.
Look, this is the part I want to put on the record for the audience who has watched the channel since 2024. For 6 years, anyone who raised the Archie timeline question on YouTube got the same response. She is on the fringe. She has form on this subject. Ignore her. The proper royal commentators do not touch it. The mainstream press does not write about it. And every time the question was raised, The response was not an answer. The response was a redirection to the messenger. This week, that argument ended. Not because Lady C found a new piece of evidence, she did not. The timeline question is the same timeline question she has been raising since her 2020 book came out. What changed is who is now willing to ask it on camera. And the man who is now willing to ask it on camera is a man with personal access to the Queen's residence, attendance at 3 royal funerals, and a hotter editor signing off a 672-page biography that the Sunday Times put in its top 10 the week it dropped. You do not need to take a position on the Sussex children to notice that the same question has now traveled.
Did you think it was a parody? Because I thought that this was AI. I thought this cannot be real.
The reason I didn't think it was AI is because it looks like the stomach is fake, where the baby, I swear that's the first thing I thought.
It started on a YouTube channel run from a castle in West Sussex. It has now landed in a hardback you can buy at W.H. Smith. The Royal Rota has not picked it up yet. The mainstream broadsheets have not picked it up yet. Give them a fortnight. This is what the slow movement of a story through tears looks like in real time. Lady Colin Campbell knocked on this door for 6 years. On the 13th of May, the man who keeps the keys to St. George's Chapel opened it for her. So where does this leave the documentary record? 6 years and 1 hotter book on. The easel at the Buckingham Palace forecourt for the 6th of May, 2019 still has a blank space at the bottom where the obstetrician's signature should be. The certificate amendment of the 5th of June 2019 at Westminster Register Office is still on file. The Sussex spokesperson's statement of January 2021 attributing the amendment to the palace is still on the public record. And no third witness, no doctor, no midwife, no hospital staff member has come forward in the 84 months since. What changed this week is the register in which the question lives. It is no longer a YouTube long form. It is a hotter hardback, a Daily Mail serialization, and a Dan Wooten on-camera interview cleared by his own publisher's lawyers. That is a different tier of conversation. And once a question reaches that tier, it does not unhear itself. This is Star Spotlight. The work we do here is to track the slow, patient way a question moves from one tier to the next, and to put the receipts in your hand when it does. The receipts on this one are in 3 places this week. The Vickers interview with Dan Wooten on YouTube and Substack, the hotter hardback in the high street bookshops, and the Tom and E. Stanley Daily Tea podcast for The Telegraph 10 days earlier, where Vickers was the headline guest. The next page of this story is already in the Post. Andrew Loney's Entitled, the #1 Sunday Times bestseller of last August on the House of York, releases its paperback on the 21st of May with what Loney himself has called sensational new material. That is 5 days from now. The window between this Vickers interview and the Loney drop is the window in which the Royal Rota will decide whether to engage with this question or sit it out. When the cautious one and the unfiltered one finally end up in the same place on the timeline question, the sender has already moved. The papers just have not announced it yet. We will be back here when the Loney chapter lands. Drop your verdict in the comments. Has the establishment finally caught up with what Lady Colin Campbell has been saying for 6 years? Or is Vickers' interview a one-off that will go nowhere? I read every single one. Hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who care about these stories. And subscribe, there's a lot more coming this week. The next chapter ships Saturday. Loney Andrew and the chapter Hotter did not include. You'll want to be here.